It was one of those long, dragging afternoons when the heat seems to melt everything in sight. The garage smelled of burnt rubber and motor oil, and the buzzing of a dying fan was the only sound cutting through the silence. That's where Daniel stood, grease-stained hands, sweat dripping down his forehead, and an empty stomach reminding him he hadn't had more than a cup of coffee since sunrise. Daniel was a mechanic, 32 years old, good with his hands, and known in his small town as the guy who never turned away someone in trouble, even if it meant skipping his own bills. His life wasn't glamorous. He lived in a rented one-room apartment above the shop, drove a rusty old pickup, and carried debts that seemed to grow faster than his paycheck. But if there was one thing Daniel had, it was a stubborn heart. He couldn't walk past someone who needed help, no matter how little he had himself. That's why, when a black luxury car rolled into his dusty lot that afternoon, it caught his attention instantly. The vehicle didn't belong there. It looked like it had been pulled straight out of the city and dropped into his worn-down street by mistake. The woman behind the wheel stepped out, clearly distressed. She looked around in hesitation, clutching her phone as if trying to decide whether to call someone or trust a stranger like him. "Something's wrong with my car," she said, her voice carrying both frustration and a quiet kind of elegance. "It just died on me." Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, trying not to look too surprised at the sight of her. Everything about her, the expensive watch, the way her hair was tied neatly despite the summer heat, even the way she stood, told him she wasn't from his world. But her eyes gave something else away. They weren't cold or distant like he'd expect. They were tired, maybe even a little sad. He popped the hood, checked a few things, and quickly figured out the issue. It wasn't major, something he could fix in less than an hour. When he told her, relief washed over her face. "How much will it cost?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. She clearly had money. He could name a number, and she'd probably hand it over without question. But something in her expression stopped him. She reminded him of his late mother, the same worried crease on her forehead, the same look of someone carrying burdens no one else could see. "Don't worry about it," Daniel finally said. "I'll get it running again for free." Her eyes widened, caught off guard. For a second, she looked like she wanted to argue, but instead, she smiled, softly, almost gratefully. Daniel thought nothing more of it. To him, it was just another act of kindness in a life where kindness was all he had to offer. But what he didn't know was that this simple choice, fixing her car for free, was about to change his life forever. Because within hours, Daniel would discover exactly who she was. And when he did, nothing about his job or his future would ever be the same. Daniel's life hadn't been easy, and anyone who knew him could tell you that. He grew up the son of a factory worker and a school secretary, two people who taught him the value of hard work but left him little else when they passed away too young. With no college degree, no family to fall back on, and barely enough money to pay for his tools, he poured everything into the garage. The shop wasn't much to look at. The walls were cracked, the sign out front faded, and most of the equipment had seen better days. But it was his, and every bolt he turned, every car he fixed, was another step toward keeping the doors open one more month. His customers, farmers, delivery drivers, folks just trying to get by, respected him for being fair. He never overcharged, never cut corners. If someone couldn't pay, Daniel worked something out. Sometimes it was cash later. Sometimes it was a bag of groceries. But that kindness came at a cost. His landlord was breathing down his neck about overdue rent. The bank had called twice last week about a loan he was falling behind on. And his boss at the larger dealership, the one who technically owned the small-town garage he managed, had given him a thinly veiled warning. "One more slip, and you're out." That boss, Mr. Carlton, was a man Daniel rarely saw but never forgot. Carlton was sharp, ruthless, and ran the dealership like a kingdom. He expected results, profits, numbers that looked good on paper. To him, Daniel was just another employee. Replaceable, dispensable, and Daniel knew it. So when the luxury car pulled in that afternoon with the elegant stranger, Daniel had every reason to think twice before giving away free labor. One more generous act, one more unpaid hour, could very well be the nail in his professional coffin. But he couldn't help himself. Something about the woman made him feel protective, though he didn't understand why. While he worked, she lingered nearby, occasionally glancing at her phone, occasionally watching him. Her presence unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. She carried herself with quiet dignity, yet there was a heaviness in her shoulders, like she was hiding the weight of a private storm. She thanked him again when the engine roared back to life, her voice softer this time. And then, without giving him her name, she drove away, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the strange feeling that he hadn't just helped a customer. He had stepped into something much bigger than himself. For the rest of the evening, Daniel couldn't shake her from his mind. Who was she really? Why did she look so relieved when he refused payment? And why did he feel that her story, whatever it was, had somehow tangled itself with his own? He didn't know it yet, but their paths hadn't just crossed by accident. In fact, before the night was over, her identity would place him in a situation he never imagined. One that could cost him not only his job, but everything he had left. The next morning started like any other. Daniel was tightening bolts under an old pickup when the sound of expensive tires crunching gravel made him slide out from beneath the truck. That same black luxury car pulled up again. His stomach flipped. She stepped out slowly, dressed differently this time. Sharp, polished, like she had walked out of a boardroom. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes locked onto him with something heavier than simple gratitude. "Daniel, right?" she asked. He froze. He hadn't told her his name. She walked closer, lowering her voice. "I didn't tell you the truth yesterday. About who I am." His chest tightened. He waited for her to continue, but before she could, the unmistakable voice of Mr. Carlton rang out from behind him. "Daniel." Daniel turned. His boss, rarely seen at the garage, was striding across the lot in a pressed suit, his face set in stone. He looked from Daniel to the woman and back again. His jaw clenched. "What's going on here?" Carlton demanded. Daniel's mind spun. The woman's posture shifted instantly, composed, guarded. She gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement to Carlton, and suddenly it clicked. The elegance, the car, the way she carried herself. She wasn't just a customer. She was his boss's wife. Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. Yesterday's kindness suddenly didn't feel so simple. He could see it in Carlton's eyes already. The suspicion, the anger brewing. I was just helping her with the car yesterday," Daniel stammered. Carlton's gaze narrowed. "Helping? For free?" His tone dripped with accusation. The woman opened her mouth to speak, but Carlton cut her off. "Get inside the car," he ordered her sharply. She hesitated, her eyes flickering back to Daniel as if she wanted to explain, to say something, but she obeyed. The door shut with a heavy thud. Carlton stepped closer to Daniel, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Daniel swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. He wanted to ask what Carlton meant, wanted to defend himself, but the words stuck in his throat. Carlton leaned in, his eyes burning. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." And with that, he turned away, sliding into the car beside his wife, leaving Daniel standing in the heat of the afternoon, his heart racing and his future hanging by a thread. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Carlton's glare, sharp enough to cut through steel. He replayed the scene in his head over and over. The woman's hesitant eyes, the way Carlton barked at her, and the way she obeyed without protest. By morning, rumors had already started swirling. A co-worker from the dealership called him, whispering that Carlton had been asking questions about Daniel's loyalty, about the garage's finances, about improper behavior. That word stung. Improper. As if helping someone in trouble was a crime. Daniel tried to keep his head down, burying himself in work, but his hands shook on every wrench he turned. He knew Carlton had the power to ruin him with a single phone call. Lose the garage, lose the little paycheck he scraped together, lose everything. The unease only deepened when the black car appeared again 3 days later, but this time, it wasn't Carlton behind the wheel. It was her. Alone. She parked quickly, stepping out with urgency, her face pale, her voice hushed. "I shouldn't be here, but I had to see you." Daniel's breath caught. He could feel the weight of what she wasn't saying pressing between them. "What's going on?" he asked. Why is he acting like I crossed some line?" Her eyes softened, filled with something that looked almost like guilt. She took a step closer. "Because he's paranoid. He doesn't trust anyone. And now, he thinks he has a reason not to trust you." Daniel frowned. "Why me? All I did was fix your car." She hesitated, glancing around as if someone might be watching. Her hand trembled slightly when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It's more complicated than that. You don't know what you stepped into. The tension in her voice set Daniel's nerves on edge. He wanted answers, but the fear in her eyes warned him there was danger in knowing too much. Before he could press further, a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop at the edge of the lot. The tinted window lowered just enough for him to see Carlton's cold, calculating stare. The woman stiffened. "He can't find me here. Not like this." She turned back to Daniel, her voice urgent. "Please, just stay out of this. Whatever happens next, don't get involved. Promise me." But before Daniel could respond, Carlton's voice echoed across the lot. Inside. Now. The command wasn't meant for Daniel this time. It was for her. And the way her body tensed told Daniel that this was more than a marriage, more than a boss's wife caught in an awkward situation. There was something darker at play. She climbed back into the car, her eyes meeting Daniel's one last time. They seemed to plead with him, silently, desperately. The SUV pulled away, dust rising in its wake, leaving Daniel frozen in place. His heart pounded. He knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just caught between a boss and his wife. He was standing on the edge of a secret big enough to destroy him. 2 nights later, Daniel was closing up the garage when headlights cut across the dark lot. His pulse jumped, black SUV. But when the door opened, it wasn't Carlton. It was her. Alone. She rushed to him, her voice low and shaking. "I don't have much time. You need to know the truth before it's too late." Daniel's chest tightened. "About what?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the empty road. "Carlton isn't just your boss. He's being investigated. Fraud. Money laundering. Worse. People are watching him. And now, because of me, they're watching you too." Daniel felt the world tilt, but before he could respond, she gripped his hand. "Listen to me. He doesn't just think you helped me out of kindness. He thinks we're working together. And if he convinces the wrong people of that," her voice broke, "you won't survive it." Daniel's blood ran cold. He thought he was caught in a personal drama, a jealous boss, a misunderstanding. But this was bigger than jobs, bigger than reputations. Carlton wasn't just dangerous. He was powerful. And Daniel was now tangled in something that could cost him far more than his livelihood. Daniel barely had time to process her words before the roar of another engine filled the lot. Carlton's SUV screeched to a stop, headlights blinding them both. "Get away from him." Carlton's voice thundered as he stormed out, his face twisted with fury. The woman froze, caught between two worlds. Daniel stepped in front of her without thinking, his hands trembling but his stance firm. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just helped. Liar." Carlton's finger stabbed the air. "You think I don't know? You think I can't see what's happening here?" Daniel's voice cracked. "All I did was fix her car. That's it." But Carlton wasn't listening. He turned on his wife, his tone sharp as a knife. "You've been feeding him information, haven't you? You're the leak." Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. That silence alone was answer enough. Carlton lunged forward, grabbing her arm, but Daniel stepped between them, shoving him back. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the dust in the air, the pounding in Daniel's chest, the years of fear he had swallowed under his boss's shadow. "Let her go," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. Carlton's face turned red, his rage boiling over. "You just destroyed yourself, boy. You're finished." Then came the sound Daniel least expected, the wail of sirens. Red and blue lights flooded the lot as unmarked cars boxed in the SUV. Agents swarmed, shouting commands. Carlton's face drained of color. No, this isn't possible." The woman stepped forward, her voice firm at last. "It's over. I told them everything." Daniel's chest heaved as he realized. She wasn't just Carlton's wife. She was the one who had been building the case against him all along. Carlton was shoved against the SUV, handcuffs snapping shut. His furious gaze never left Daniel. "This isn't over," he spat. But just as Daniel thought the nightmare was ending, the woman turned to him, her expression heavy. "You don't understand. You were part of this now. They'll think you knew more than you did." Daniel blinked, the relief draining out of him. "What are you saying?" Her voice cracked, guilt lacing every word. "I dragged you into this, and I don't know if I can get you out." The flashing lights faded, and the dust finally settled. But Daniel felt like he was standing on shifting ground. Carlton was gone, hauled away in the back of a federal car, yet the echo of his threats still clung to the night air. For a long time, Daniel and the woman just stood there, caught in the silence that followed chaos. She looked smaller now, stripped of the guarded elegance she carried before. For the first time, she looked less like a figure out of his world and more like a person, tired, fragile, human. Her name was Evelyn. She told him everything at last. How she had lived under Carlton's shadow for years, watching him build his empire on lies, fearing what would happen if she spoke out. How the investigators had come to her in secret, desperate for someone on the inside. And how she had taken the risk, knowing it could destroy her marriage, her safety, even her life. Daniel listened quietly, hands still stained with grease, the smell of motor oil clinging to him. He wasn't sure what he felt. Anger at being dragged into something he never asked for, or relief that the truth was finally out. Maybe both. "I never meant for you to be part of this," Evelyn whispered. "You were just kind, and I hadn't seen kindness in so long." Her words sank deep. All he had done was fix a car for free, thinking it was nothing. Yet that small act had unraveled something far larger than himself. The weeks that followed were messy. Investigators questioned him again and again, digging into his life, his choices, his connection to Carlton's wife. He answered as honestly as he could. At times, he worried he'd lose everything: his shop, his freedom, his peace. But slowly, the storm began to pass. Carlton's empire crumbled piece by piece in the news. Fraud, embezzlement, offshore accounts. The charges piled up higher than anyone expected. Evelyn, though scarred by what she'd endured, found a strange kind of strength in the wreckage. She visited Daniel once more, months later, not in secrecy, not in fear, but simply to thank him. "You reminded me that there are still good people in the world," she said softly. "Don't lose that, no matter what happens." Daniel never forgot those words. Life went on. Cars came and went, bills still piled up, and the garage never looked any prettier. But there was something different in him now, a quiet sense that even the smallest choices could ripple far beyond what he could see. He never saw Evelyn again. Maybe that was for the best. Their worlds were never meant to overlap. Yet sometimes, late at night, he thought of that black car rolling into his dusty lot, and how one moment of compassion had changed everything. And though the weight of it all still lingered, Daniel carried one truth with him. Sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought with power or wealth, but with a single act of kindness that refuses to bend, even when the world tries to break it.